How
Mhm.
could you make it? Because my family is in Ukraine. I know there were hours and days without electricity.
Well, at the beginning of the war, it was not so much problems with electricity supply or all these other aspects which happened afterwards, but it was, great stress. And of course, let's say if you before you used to live in a normal life, and now you're living with a potential or not very practical danger to your life or to you, let's say, to your family. Lives, it's a different thing. Electricity supply or internet connection is just a matter of, since it's global business, it has a lot of issues with the cross-border payments and the multi-currency FX costs, and other things related to exchanging from one currency to another.
The next question is, the best AI tool is?
Anthropic Claude is the best.
Los pagos online cada día se hacen mucho más simples y amigables para nosotros como usuarios. Sin embargo, del otro lado, se hacen mucho más complejos para los proveedores y empresas. Diferentes métodos de pago, diferentes monedas, tiempo de integración y velocidad de pago hacen este mundo muy desafiante. Y hoy vamos a hablar con Andrew Rabchik, que es el fundador de Akorateco. Akorateco es una plataforma de orquestación y vamos a hablar de los pagos. Vamos a hablar del fraude, de agentic commerce y también un poco del futuro. La entrevista va a ser en inglés, así que asegúrate de activar los subtítulos y vamos por este episodio. Andrew, you're running the company, you're traveling a lot, you are originally from Ukraine, but today what wakes you up?
Well, first of all, let's say it's I'm inspired very much by my family and by so a lot of things what I do in my life, and the majority of things I do it for them, and it gives me, let's say, the energy to wake up and also to move forward. Also, I'm very much inspired by the team and by people who are surrounding me, and who are in my team or in other teams, which have, let's say, big ideas. Think, let's say, for some, dreaming a lot, dreams great. So, and this is probably the biggest inspiration. So I'm inspired by people, inspired by Sayer, but what they do, what they dream, and say I'm getting this energy from them always, and it's inspiring me more than others.
You mentioned your team. I know you built some payment. You had a payment business, PSP, in Ukraine. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? How did it start, and then how the Akorateco was born?
Well, okay. So once again, I will start with a short intro. So my name is Andrew Rabchuk. I'm a founder and CTO of Akorateco, the payment orchestration platform, white label payment gateway. I'm into payments more than 25 years, and I graduated from the technical university, and 23 years ago, me together with my colleague, also from the same university, were participating for some outsourcing projects. Some of them, let's say, had relation to payments. So I was really interested from the day one about payments. Nevertheless, it was quite difficult, quite a different payment landscape comparing what we have now. So it was more simple, and it was much less sophisticated. But it was interesting. So I continued to let's say to looking for knowledge and for information in that field. And after some years, I've created, based on the experience and based on what I saw, how it's working abroad Ukraine, I've created my first PSP in Ukraine. And obviously, it's it should have like technical platform, technical backbone. So it was third generation of the platform. Then we created the second generation of the platform, and the PSP business and the payments in general were developing in the whole world, and particularly in Ukraine. And it becomes more interesting, more sophisticated, more challenging. but also more limited in regards of licensing, in regards of verticals of businesses, competition on the market, and other aspects. So after a while, I decided to concentrate my efforts on creating pure technological company, which Akorateco is actually, which has no limits, has no any licensing issues or any other limitations. And that's how Akorateco was born. It's how it's growing and developing. It's already 5.5 years on the market, and I'm really excited to move forward with that.
How? Tell us a little bit about this period, tough period for every Ukrainian and every Ukrainian business that was 5 years ago. Where were you? How did you run the business? And what's changed in your mentality on the way of operating the business?
Well, before the war, and I assume that you're referring to the war, which unfortunately is currently happening in Ukraine. Before the war, we had 2 years, almost 2.5 years of pandemic of COVID, and before the pandemic, we worked the way that most people did, so from the office. And those 2 years taught us how to operate fully remotely, and it was good lesson for all of us. I mean, we learned how to use Slack, Jira, Zoom. I mean, by far more efficient than it was before, and then just how to use that in general, because like Zoom, I never tried Zoom before, maybe for the pandemic. And working remotely is a completely different story comparing working from the office place. You lose the day-to-day and person contact, and it's for a lot of people it means significant change for their approach, for their day-to-day operations, and how they, let's say, could organize themselves, how they, let's say, they are starting their working day, and how they ending up the working day, finishing, and so on and so forth. So,
where were you?
Where
were the company? Where were you when the war started?
Before the war, I was already outside of Ukraine. I was living in Spain. So, in your conditions, when it's much more, let's say, stressful than it used to be for. And I'm very proud for my team that let's say all of us were aligned about let's say nevertheless what's happening. We should be, in working mode. We should deliver the product. We should deliver support and other things which are which our clients expect. And that's why I think that's one of the keys and secret sauce what Akorateco has.
Let's talk about Akorateco. You mentioned it's a purely tech company.
Correct.
Can you explain in simple words what does it mean and what's the difference versus what we have currently on the market today?
Well, okay. So Akorateco is a payment orchestration platform and white label payment gateway. So why I'm using two terms, because since we are the company mostly dedicating our services for payment service providers, acquiring banks, and enterprise level merchants, it's more close to the white label payment gateway. But the core feature of Akorateco, it's a payment orchestration. So what is payment orchestration? Actually, it's 6 years ago, hardly anyone, let's say, heard about that. But nowadays, it's quite popular word, and a lot of companies use that to name their services and what they do. But in fact, they do quite different things. And the very simple explanation, it's the way and not the tool, but set of tools and measurements to optimize your payment flow. And by optimizing, I mean how to make it more efficient in regards of the acceptance rate, how to make it less costly in regards of selecting and using your payment providers or banks, how to make it less risky using the top-notch anti-fraud tools, how to be aligned with requirement of regulators using KYC, KYB providers, how to make interconnectivity and to to exchange data with third-party systems like CRMs, ERP, or whatever, and how to make it all happen in one place and get control over that. So the Accurat-Echo, using all experience, what I have and what my colleagues have, because majority of employees of Accurat-Echo used to work in payment business before. So this expertise helped us, let's say, to create really great product and help us, let's say, to continue to improve that product. And this is actually platform which helps you, let's say, to either to run your payment business if you're a payment provider, or to enrich your payment business if it's already running with new features or with more payment integrations, or to streamline your payments and increase significantly efficiency of your payment flow if you're enterprise level merchant, or add new features and, let's say, make the significant raise in regards of the service you're offering to customers if you're acquiring bank. So it's all in one. So it's a technological platform with all features, and also payment team as a service. So as we position ourselves being payment experts.
You said payment team as a service.
Correct. Because if you have a sophisticated tool, you have to understand how to use that tool. Because let's say if you have a all variety of features and payment integration, but you don't know how to use that properly, you either let's say will be disappointed after a while, or you will not just get even 10% of the potential outcome which that platform could bring to you.
I heard personally for the first time about orchestration, I think 3 years ago. First, I thought what the music orchestration has to do with payments. That was the first things in my mind. But then I said, wow, it totally makes sense, like how it didn't exist before. Like I said, this is such a simple but such a unique thing. Why do you think it became necessary 6 years ago, or like, I don't know, for me 3 years ago? I'm talking about mostly about LATAM, and why which industry need it most?
Well, I would say that the payment world and the payment space is developing even maybe faster than others. It become more complex, appearing new payment methods, appearing new standards, which created the payments for the end customer more seamless and easier, like the Apple Pay or Click to Pay or any other wallets, which helps, let's say, in your, let's say, 25 years ago, you were paying with a slip. So you put your card on some paper, do like that, and then put a signature. Then you were paying with a card, with a swiping the card or the machine. Then and every time it was wow. So we didn't know that it's possible. It's much easier than it was used to be before. Then it was NFC chips. Then it was, EMV chips. Then it became, the contactless. Then it became, let's say, it's that you're paying with your phone, then with your watch, whatever. But every time, and it's, makes life of the customer better and easier to pay. It become more complex, behind the scene.
Right.
And
because of the online payments and digital, like e-commerce was growing, there was more need about the faster payments, different payments, better experience. I see a lot this in the airline industry, where it's usually 80% of their business is online. It's a high ticket merchant. What makes airline payments unique, and what are their biggest challenges?
Okay. Airline payments are unique, starting with the fact that they're global by the default. You're absolutely right that it's high ticket transactions with obviously high fraud exposure. There are also other facts which people forget about airline payments, that the payment itself has to carry by far more information than a regular e-commerce transaction. So it should have the passenger name record, electronic miscellaneous documents, information about potential exchange rate. So, all of that so-called long record. And that's why, having this long record, you can use, let's say, the different MCC related to airlines, which has different, pricing from schemes, billing and settlement plan, and many other elements. So, which eventually makes the payment by far more complex comparing to the regular e-com. In addition to that, there are, multiple sales channels. So a lot of tickets sold through resellers, through agencies, and a lot of them are done in last second. So with high risk of, let's say, cancellation of their services. Since it's global business, it has a lot of issues with the cross-border payments and the multi-currency FX costs and other things related to exchanging from one currency to another. So, as any global business, it should work with alternative payment methods, because people normally like to pay with a payment method which, let's say, they used to pay normally. Not like if you are in India, you should obviously, if you'd like to sell airline tickets in India, you should use UPI. You should have UPI as a payment method. If you sell it in Brazil, it should be Pix. If you sell it in other countries in Latin America, or like Colombia, they should have local payment methods of Colombia, like Brevi and others. So all that in complex make payments in airlines by far more sophisticated comparing to others. And so payment orchestration, it's hard to overestimate the importance of payment orchestration for lane payments, because since you have really, let's say, long list of requirements in regards to features, since you have potentially high risk business in the face of issuers and acquiring banks, and let's say your airline which is expanding to new markets, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of things, let's say, to be done from your payment team. And in addition to that, let's not forget about the routing and retries and cascading, just to keep the acceptance rate on the acceptable level. Because since it's high ticket size, and if we talk about even cards, and you are airline from Latin America, and you are selling to European customers, and if you have acquired in Latin America, most probably the acceptance rates for European cards would be significantly lower. So you need to have the local acquirer in Europe, you need to have local financial partners somewhere in Asia or any other region you target your services. So like that. So this keeping the acceptance rate on a high level potential fraud exposure. And about fraud, it could be just stolen cards, overtaking of accounts, even friendly fraud, because there are a lot of friendly fraud in that industry. So it's all of that makes this business, from one hand, is quite solid, but from the other hand, in regards of what considered by acquirers and considered by issuers, quite risky. So I think that which makes airline industry one of the most sophisticated and hardest in regards of, let's say, implementing of the payments and the payment processing comparing to others. So yes, I think so.
When you explain it, it sounds like a nightmare. So many options, cross-border, high ticket, integration apart with their GDS, passenger information, last minute transactions. Where do you guys come into the game? Like, maybe do you have any stories from that industry or another industry, how you help the merchants to
I would say that first of all, you have to understand that the payment orchestration is not anymore one size fits all. So you cannot be good enough for marketplaces and for airlines. And let's say if you would like to step into airlines payments, you should be prepared. You should be integrated to GDS. You should be integrated to anti-fraud providers which are specializing on airline tickets. You should understand potential risk and thresholds in regards of chargebacks. You should understand, let's say, what this particular airline company is doing, what are their plans, and if you understand that, let's say, and if you dedicated some efforts, time, and money for that, you're ready. And I mean, it's which means that, let's say, if you're doing that, you're not doing something else, and this is actually a story not only about Akorateka, it's about the other players who are moving strategically towards some direction. But for us, we see it's like very promising market, and we took already a lot of efforts into adjusting our product to fit requirements of airline companies. We have few ongoing projects and integrating to majority of main systems like Galileo, Sabre, and Amadeus. And I have a strong belief that we would be very competitive in that regard.
Do you remember your first business in Akorateka? Your first success?
Who was? You mean who was our first customer?
Yes.
Well, it's funny enough because our first customer was from Saudi Arabia, and it was during the COVID time, and since we are white label, quite frequently I cannot share names of our customers because they would like to. They're using us as under their own brand. So but it's financial company, it's a payment provider in Saudi Arabia, and they reached us and beginning of the COVID time, and it was comparing to what's currently happening on and how the financial market looks now in Saudi Arabia. It was very, very beginning. It was hardly a few players with licenses. Because of security issues, because of inability to change their processes, or just because we used to do it that way and we don't want to change that, and other aspects. But I think it's obvious for me that who is using AI now is now winning the time, and the time is the most valuable resource ever.
I was just in another conference in New York 2 months ago, and there was around 300 people, like leaders for e-commerce, payments, and fraud prevention, and they did outlook about AI implementation in the companies. I was around 40% already have something in house. 30 are actively evaluating, and what is left, and another 30 are thinking to implement like a system. So yeah, you're still there. Definitely not the last one, but not the first one. That's what the trend that I saw in live.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
You said something about agentic payments. Can you
Correct.
explain what is that and what's the difference with agentic commerce?
In very simple words, it's when nowadays the process of the payment on checkout page or clicking, with biometrical identification or whatever, is purely until agentic payments, of course, is purely controlled by the person. So the person decides that, well, now I decide to pay. I confirm that. So agentic payment in general, it's the payment which fully processed by the machine. So now when you're paying through the checkout page on the different side, it's already a machine, and you, because when you're paying, your data is transferred to the payment gateway, and then to the payment provider, and then to the acquiring bank or whatever. So on the other side, this machine is already. And agentic payment is dedicated to replace you with the machine. That you, let's say, will say that, well, I would like to buy, yellow shoes, not more than 150 pounds, and I would like to have it by next Tuesday, and I would like to have it cheap, with certain size and in a blue box. And the agent will search all varieties and options which are offering those boots with that box. And we'll do the payment, of course, if the agent has access to the payment data. But immediately there are rising a lot of questions. Who would be controlling that? The agent would not buy that from a legal source. Who would be controlling the execution of the payment, that it would be with a certain amount, certain conditions, and who is taking responsibility, and when is something happening with that payment? What would be with refunds or with return of money, with cancellation of the payment? What would be the scheme? How it would work? And the most important thing, what would be the legal basis of all of that? Yes, under which legal framework it has been done? Because the internet is, it's still, let's say, allow you cross-border payments and other options, and different jurisdictions. So I think that those questions are arising massively now, and it's a hot topic nowadays. And but still, I don't see that it's we are coming closer to this legal and practical framework, which will bring us, let's say, closer to have tomorrow these agentic payments massively used by everyone. So it's great, but as it normally happens, and it's definitely will be something in place to use, and maybe in our day-to-day routines. But when and in what form, I don't know.
Are you more excited or you are more concerned?
No, I'm not concerned at all. Since I'm in a payment landscape, I see potential here. What I'm trying to say that it's better, let's say, to not to try to implement that immediately, but rather wait a bit and see what's happening, and how to make it happen, and to see outcome out of that and when I'm saying outcomes, that you see that substantial amount of transaction.
We heard a lot of valuable information. We need to get to the end of this episode, to the session of Twitter. The Twitter session means that I will start a phrase and you need to finish it, as it were like a short message on Twitter.
Sure.
But before that, is there anything else that maybe you wanna tell that the people that will listen to episode before we go to the ending?
Well, I would like to say that I'm happy to be here today and share my thoughts and my knowledge related to payments. And I'm always happy to talk with people who are, who are interested into payments and to share ideas or to share opinions. So if you you can find me in LinkedIn, you can find me on our website, and feel free just to get in contact with me, and let's talk about payments.
Let's talk about payments. We will leave probably your personal LinkedIn, professional LinkedIn on the description.
Sure.
Let's get to the Twitter session. It's my favorite part.
Sure.
The future of payments is?
The future of payments is seamless to customer and even more complex for providers and for orchestrators.
Seamless for providers and more complex for seamless.
The other way around. So it becomes more and more simple for customer. Now, as I said, we pay with just double click on our iPhone. Maybe we would pay in the next without even having to double click, but saying, well, I would like to pay, and it's already done. Or maybe you would just be thinking about it.
Actually, now I remember. I never recommend you have a blog, right, Andrew?
No, I don't have personal blog. We have blog on our website, and we share some ideas and some white papers and some materials related to payments and to our to all payments niche, to all payments landscape.
We have some people sign it from the community. We have them sign it. They gave me a good feedback, so I recommend everyone to check the blog of Korateco. The next question is, the best AI tool is?
So far, I believe Anthropic Claude is the best.
For the personal use or business?
Well, it's a good question. Yes, for both, I would like to say, but it's dependent who you are as an individual. If you need, if you are using AI tool for some, some practical tasks, nevertheless, your individual or the company, it's certainly Anthropic, in my opinion. But if you are looking for a friend to talk with, maybe OpenAI is better from that perspective, but I don't know. So my answer is Anthropic.
Guys, let's get in touch with Korateco, see what's possible. I work in the space, in the payments industry for 3 years, much less than Andrew, but I already saw the difference. And I think what makes it different, the biggest difference, as you said, people, how do you set payment team as a service?
Yes.
Your speed, the quality, support. This is for me personally the biggest challenge in Latin America. It's the way of the service. We have a technology, we have people, but sometimes it's or late, or the service part is a weak part of the company, which I see a huge potential. You know, the speed, support, people, the way you respond, the way you give a solution. So when you have a European provider mindset, you will definitely can succeed. Thanks again for your time, and until the next one. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vadim. Yeah, it was great talk.